Welcome, everybody. Thank you for adding your name, your school, or just your district or role. That's awesome to see everybody here today. This is being recorded, so if you miss parts of it, no worries. It will get up on our website, um, whenever it's ready. And if questions come up, please feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can also come off of mute and ask questions. It's okay. We're good with either. Jennifer has just dropped copies of the PowerPoint in the chat, so you can access those if you are able. And today we're going to be talking about developing compliant transition plans. Now, this is for the older students, so these are for high school transition plans. So just a little note about that. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going. So you'll see them. This is section 9 of the IEP that is required for those students of a certain age or grade. So our agenda today, we're going to do quick introductions of our team, and then we'll talk about what that B13 indicator is. And that's why we have this training, because of that B13 indicator. We have a quick couple of case studies that we'll talk about, and then we'll go over, there are some checklists that help you be more compliant with your transition plans that we have available, and then we have some FAQs and then some resources. And again, questions. If they come up, please ask them either in the chat or come off of mute. So we're going to get started. So my name is Carly Thibodeau. I have been with this team for just over 3 years. And before that, I was a teacher for 21 years. And with me today is Jennifer.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Gleason. Like the rest of the team, I was a special education teacher before I joined this team 4.5 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you. And Julie is with us also.
Hi, I'm Julie Pelletier. I'm the admin support for the monitoring team. I've been with the DOE for 9 years, and prior to that, I was admin support at a K-5 elementary school for 16 years.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And then Colette Sullivan and Ashley Satry are also members of our team. They're just busy doing other things today. So we are the supervision, monitoring, and support team. So when we talk today, we're really going to be talking about that supervision and monitoring piece, but we are also here to support you. So that's why we encourage the questions. We like to have a conversation during these trainings, more of us just talking at you. So please feel free to come off and ask questions when they come up. So what is B13? Now we are talking about this as transition planning, and that's really what it is. But the reason we look at this specific piece as part of our position on the supervision and monitoring team is because it is a federal indicator. And what that means is there are these 18 indicators that need to be reported to the federal DOE or OSEP, the Office of Special Ed Programs. And so this is number 13 in that list, and it's from Part B, so that's why it's called B13. And so it's all about those secondary transition plans for those high school students. And so basically, in that B13, if you were to look that up or Google it, you would see that it requires at the federal level that students aged 16 and older must have a transition plan in place. So that's what we look for, because we look for those federal guidelines. But we also have to keep in mind our Maine guidelines, and those do go above and beyond a bit, because for Maine, it actually says starting in grade 9, or when they turn 18, 16, sorry. So we just look at that to make sure that you are complying with what is required in IDEA for that transition plan. And that's what we're going to go over today. And so this is just more information about why we're really looking at this as part of our monitoring process. And it's really because we take this information and we send it to that OSEP office at the federal level, because we have to do this annual report thing. And the frustrating part about this is that if we look at several pieces of the transition plan, we'll talk about it in pieces today. And if even one piece of that is non-compliant, we have to mark the whole thing 0%. It's very frustrating. So every single piece that we talk about today has to be 100% for the whole transition plan to be 100%. And the bar at the federal level is 100%. So for all of them. So that's why we do a specific focus on this. And then just a little note about compliance versus programming. And you may hear us talk about compliance versus best practice. That's kind of what I think about too, because we monitor for compliance. So these are all the pieces that we're going to talk about that must be in place to be compliant. But you'll also hear us talk about best practice, which hopefully leads to that better programming for the student, because really it is about the programming. It isn't just about having that compliant paperwork, but that is the piece that we are tasked with looking at. So when you're thinking about that programming for the student and making it the best for them, think about what a meaningful day is for the student when you're thinking about their transition plan. Because it's really about them being to participate in their community and being an active participant in life. Okay, so really thinking about how this transition plan can support this person to be as active as they can be within their community and beyond high school, because this is all about transitioning them from that high school life and then helping them become productive as they transition out of high school. So when you're thinking about meaningful day, you're really thinking about how you can help them be successful as they move on out of high school. And so the things that come up in that transition plan, you are thinking about that education and training that they'll need, that employment, and then ways to get them to be active members in their community. So just a note that everyone really deserves that opportunity to live a life that is meaningful to them. So the transition plan is really thinking about what is meaningful to the student. And sometimes that's hard because the students don't always know, right? They are sometimes a little unsure, especially those younger students when you start trying to talk to them about what they want to do after high school and they're a freshman. They may not have answers for you. And that's okay, but try to get them to think about some ideas and start thinking about what they want to do as they're transitioning. And so, and then as people supporting those students, thinking about, okay, how are you trying to support the student? Like, is there an assessment that I can give them? There are many transition assessments out there. Is there something that may be more useful for this student to help them narrow down what they want to focus on? And then thinking about, once you have narrowed it down through those assessments, like how are you helping them to figure out what they want to do after high school and through that transition piece. All right. Any questions so far? We've only talked about the meaningful day stuff, I know, and kind of what B13 is. We'll get into the compliance piece, but anything that has popped out to you at this point, or a burning question you might have?
Nothing in the chat box, Carly.
Perfect. We're going to keep moving along, but like I've said, and I really do mean it, please interrupt me. Drop things in the chat if you don't want to interrupt, but then also feel free to come off of mute and interrupt me. It's okay. Okay, so now we're going to get into the meat of this, where we talk about these specific pieces of the B13 or the transition plan that we look at for compliance. So when you're starting and you're working on the IEP for the student, the very first thing or place you're going to see this is in section 3, because that very last question in section 3, where those yes no's are, is the child in 9th grade or above or 16 years old or older? And if you check yes, you should be going to the transition plan, because the transition plan really should be completed before the rest of the IEP, because the IEP is the document that is going to support that student in accomplishing what's on their transition plan. So keep that in mind also. So here is that section 9 of the IEP, just a snapshot of it. These are all the pieces that we'll talk about today, and some outside of this also. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier when I was talking about that B13 piece. IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, at the federal level says that a transition plan must be in place at age 16 and older. However, MUSER, the Maine Unified Special Ed Regulations, those are our state regulations. And so they can go above and beyond what the federal level says. And so Maine has decided that it needs to start no later than 9th grade. So if you have a 9th grader that's 15, then you would still do the transition plan. So for Maine, it starts no later than 9th grade, but at the federal level, it's 16. That's why at our team, when we come in to monitor, we'll say we're only looking at 16-year-olds and older and no seniors, which it leaves a very small window. So we apologize for that. But that is why we stick to those guidelines. And just another note that these transition plans, these post-secondary plans are only for students with disabilities, and again, beginning their 9th grade year here in Maine. However, it is said that the sooner you start talking about transition and starting this with the students has a better outcome for them. So I think we've visited some SAUs where I've seen like middle school IEPs where there have been transition plans, because some SAUs choose to do transition plans starting in middle school. And that's okay, because that would be above compliance, right? So that would be above and beyond. But compliance is that you must start at 9th grade. And then also keep in mind that the transition plan is about showing movement. So the transition plan is updated at least annually, and changes will probably be made, most likely, because students often change their mind a lot. So if they're a freshman, then they may think they want to do one thing that year or have no idea what they want to do. And then the next year they might have a different idea, and so on. So it is made to be changed from year to year, and that's okay. Okay. So we're going to jump in. So this is like our chart or checklist that we look at. So these are the pieces of the transition plan that we look at, and then where we look at them. Okay. So the first two things that we're going to talk about actually come from the advance written notice. So we look for the purpose of the meeting and the child invited to the meeting. So we're going to go through that on the advance written notice. So when we ask for paperwork to look at transition files, we will ask for the advanced written notice from that annual meeting, because like I said, it needs to be discussed at least annually. So we will ask for that annual advanced written notice. And what we look for is that you have that post-secondary goals and transition services checked. That must be checked to notify the people attending the meeting, including the parents, that you will be discussing that transition plan. So typically it's in conjunction with that annual review, and that's the one that we would be looking for or asked to look at to make sure that you're saying you're going to be talking about that. So this is compliance. Then child invited to the meeting. That's the other thing we look for on the advanced written notice. So the child must be invited. So best practice would be to include them in the salutation where you put dear parents and then also include the student's name. However, we have had feedback that some vendors don't allow you to change that and you can't put the student in there, and that's okay. But make sure that they are listed as an invitee on that advanced written notice, so that their name is listed under that child or adult student, like on that invitee list. So that would be compliant. All right, next we're talking about agency invited with parents' prior written consent.
I'm sorry,
Now,
can
we're
I
kind
just
of,
ask a quick question? This is
Sure.
Michelle. So
yes,
if we have it so that the child's name is automatically populating with the invite with the parent on the top there, but we don't have them listed, when you put the participants on that list, is that still compliant or does it need to be in both places?
that's a really good question. I've never been asked that before. I don't know. Jennifer, what do you think?
Well, do you put the parents in the list?
The parents' names within the system automatically populate. When we create the advanced written notice, we use EDMS and we can have a box that we can check that says invite the student. And so it does that, but it doesn't always necessarily, when you have your list of people invited to the meeting, populate the name of the student, doesn't populate the name of the student. And so we have to, I think, manually enter that in. So I just wanted to check to make sure, because we have it often checked. So the student is invited there and our staff makes sure that the student is aware of the IEP meeting and attends, invited to the meeting in that regards. But I didn't know if it had to be listed in both places for compliance. I just wanted to make sure of that.
I mean, I think I would call it compliant, but I'm not sure how, I hate to always go here, but I always go here. I'm not sure how a hearing officer would interpret that. So
Unfortunately,
maybe talk
that's
to
what it's about,
EDMS.
right?
Maybe talk to EDMS and make sure that they do whatever they do with the parent, they also do it the student when it's checked, invite student.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think I would say the same, like compliance, I would mark it as compliant because
Yeah.
if I see the student name in the salutation, I don't even check the list.
Right.
You know what I
don't
mean?
either.
So like when we're reviewing, I would call it compliant. But again, like Jennifer said, yeah, I would.
Yeah, because then on the actual written notice, it says who was actually in the meeting, the students,
Yeah.
listed there as
Yeah,
well.
definitely.
There's
Yeah.
evidence to support that the child was
Right.
at the meeting. So but I just wanted to check. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So jumping back into this is that agency invited. And so we're kind of skipping right to the end of section 9. So we would look at 9G, and then we also look for the parental consent form. So this has been a change. We've been training to this for, I think this is our 3rd year training to it, or 4th year. But this was a change in practice, but we have been talking about it for a while. And so what we found when we got into the regulations and really started looking at IDEA and MUSER was that the public agency, and I'm going to skip to this slide real quick, the public agency must invite this representative if there is a representative involved. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this one. And so what that means is we will look at section 9G. And if 9G has an agency listed here, then we will look for all of these other things. Okay, so this only happens if you have someone listed in 9G. We would look for the parental consent being signed by the parent to invite that representative of that agency. And it needs to be sent before the advanced written notice so that they can be listed as an invitee. And also, it needs to be for every meeting where you're checking off on the advanced written notice, post-secondary transition is going to be discussed. So that means it has to happen at least annually. But if you have other meetings and there's an outside agency, then you would need to invite them and you would need parental consent and you would need, you would need the parental consent. So just remember that. So if you check that box on the advanced written notice and there is an agency, you would need to go through this process. But regulation says you only need to do this, or you have to do this at least annually. So you must invite, the public agency must invite that representative. And so you're going to document this by using the parental consent to form. And so you're going to fill out the date given or mailed to the parent, and you keep that to show that you knew there was an agency involved. You tried to get the consent from the parent. If the parent does not send back consent, then that is your proof that you tried to invite them. Now, if the parent gives consent, they'll sign it and then just mark the date that you received that back. And then that's your proof that you had parental consent, and then you invited that representative from that outside agency. Now, there will be times when you did not know that there was an outside agency involved and the parent shows up with them. That's okay. The parent can invite whoever they want to the meeting. They can bring whoever they want. So if they show up with someone, just make sure that you document in the written notice that the parent invited this outside agency, you know, that you weren't aware that they were involved. But then going forward, you would include them in the transition plan, and then you would be the one responsible to invite them to future meetings. Any questions about this one? Because this is like I said, it's new-ish. Like I said, we've been training to it. But okay, I don't see any questions about this part on there. So if anything comes up, just ask. All right, now we're going to talk about the written notice, what we look for in the written notice. And we look for a statement that those post-secondary goals have been updated. And again, that must be done at least annually. So we would look at the written notice, and then we would expect the written notice to also be checked that this was about post-secondary goals and transition services. And then we look for a statement. And in here, this little screenshot shows section 5. There's a statement that the team reviewed and updated the transition plan and transition goals. However, it doesn't have to be in section 5. It can be anywhere in the written notice. We'll read the whole thing if we need to. We'll find it wherever it is. Just making sure that you're making that statement that you are updating those transition goals in that plan. All right, and then on the transition plan, 9A, that very first section of the transition plan, just make sure you're including that projected date of graduation or program completion. So just the month and year is compliant. And again, this transition plan is all about showing movement. So if something happens and you thought the student was on a 4-year projected graduation or exit, and it turns into 5 or 6 or, however many, that date can be changed. So, and also just making sure that you're documenting that in the written notice, that discussion about why the date is changing, why the student may need more time in high school, those extra credits, or even if you think that they are a student that will need to go until that age out of 22, as soon as you know that, it's best to start planning for that.
Can I add one thing there, Carly?
Absolutely. Please do.
So I think you want to have that discussion right from the start and every year, because we get calls from parents often that say, the school is graduating my kid and I thought they had 2 more years or something like that. So they shouldn't be surprised when graduation comes up or that their student is not graduating.
Excellent point. Okay, next we're going to talk about section 9B of the transition plan. And this is where you list those transition assessments for the student. So 9B compliant would be listing those assessments that have been completed with the student. Best practice is to include the year that they were completed. However, that is not necessary. Compliance is just having those listed. And we would expect to see at least one assessment here, But if the student is older, like if they're a junior and they only have one listed, that would be questionable. And we would probably put a best practice note that there should be multiple, because this should be happening frequently, at least annually, I would say, with the student, to see what their interests are and how they've changed. So just keep that in mind. Just a note about what are acceptable transition assessments that can be listed in section 9B. So you have the ones that are acceptable that have those transition pieces embedded within them, like the SATs, the PSATs, the ASVAB, and the AccuPlacer. And then the ones on the right would not be considered compliant for a transition assessment because they do not have those transition components embedded within them. And again, I think we're going to say this on every section, but it's all about showing movement. And so that's why we really recommend the multiple assessments and showing those years that they're completed, excuse me, because it shows that movement, that the student is moving on and, you know, looking into other avenues. And you can also include the transition plan, the transition assessments within section 4A. That is not required, but you can include them in section 4A if you choose to. And then here is a resource that you could access. This is our Transition Maine website, and there are many transition assessments on this website. As a parent, I have actually had both of my children complete these transition assessments because they're in high school and they were a little like, I don't know what I want to do. And both of them did transition assessments from our website and kind of helped them get on a track because they weren't really sure what they were doing. All right, moving on to the next part of the transition plan. This is section 9C. And this is just making a statement of whether the student attended the meeting or that they did not attend the meeting. And then just if they did not attend the meeting, making sure to document when you met with them to talk about their post-secondary interests, because this plan really is about what they are interested in doing. So you do need student input, even if they cannot attend the meeting. All right, the next pieces that we look at are those post-secondary goals, and they're broken down into 3 types of goals. We have our education, training, employment, and independent living. So the education training goal is really thinking about what the student is going to receive for education or training, what they're planning on doing to get education or training that will help them move into that career that they are interested in. So these are written statements about the student will do this and move on. And then just a note about education and training to employment, they really should align to each other. So if the student is planning on getting education and training in a certain field, then that employment should be aligned to that field that they're getting that education and training in. And then independent living goal, this is optional. So just really thinking about, does the student require this independent living goal? Don't just assume that they don't. Really think about that and, talk to them about it. So here are a few examples of what those goals might look like. So we've got Bill here, and he plans to attend a 4-year college or university to study marketing or receive on-the-job training to become a carpenter. So he's got a couple of things he wants to explore. And so they're both included here, and that's completely okay. And then his employment, you can see, is aligned to that. He will work in the field of marketing or as a carpenter. So in this, maybe Bill's a freshman and maybe this is what he wants to do now, but he could change his mind and maybe he wants to do something different later. And that's okay. These goals can change. And you can see that this student does have an independent living goal. And so it's about accessing mental health supports in his community independently or with assistance. So the independent living skill goal isn't necessarily for only students that are, or only for certain students. It can be for anybody. Okay, so this is, yeah, so I've talked about students not really knowing what they want to do, but sometimes there are students that really have an idea of what they want to do, but it may not be in their best interest to try to pursue that career. So it's, I mean, it's okay to let them want to do things that may not be a great fit for them. However, you can take this as an opportunity to help them look at some other things related to that may be more suitable for them. So, this is that whole transition piece is about setting up those opportunities for the student to explore these fields. And so maybe thinking about things in that related field. So this example is about a video gamer. So instead of like, maybe they can't be a professional video gamer, but what could they do that may be related to that field? And so really finding somebody that they could follow, do some job shadowing, or, thinking about finding other jobs that are related to that. Some examples here are like that game tester, a game designer. So, helping them figure out a path that may be more suitable. And then when you're thinking about these post-secondary goals, there must be alignment to at least one of the annual goals in Section 5 to address these post-secondary goals. So you wouldn't want to create in Section 5, you wouldn't want to have a goal that's like called a transition goal. We have seen that in the past. But you really just want to attach it to an existing goal. You don't need to identify it as a transition goal. It can be one of their existing, if they have academic or functional, that's completely okay. So you can attach it like this, like, so you have one goal that's attached to one post-secondary and another to second and so on, or you can just have one goal that's attached to all three. So here's an example. There was this academic goal in this student's IEP around writing an essay. And so this already was in place, and it does align to the post-secondary goal because the student wants to attend a four-year college or university. So the student would need to work on his writing skills to be able to do that, because they would need to take a class in college around that would require that skill. And then this functional goal was already in place around the student's anxiety, and they're working on techniques learned and managing anxiety. And so this would also be aligned to their post-secondary goals, because managing anxiety will help them with whatever they want to do for education and training and for employment. That's a life skill that you would need across all settings. All right, the next part of the transition plan that we're going to talk about is the part where you put in the courses of study, Section 9E. So this is where you put that courses of study. So here you can see that it is broken down by the years that the student is in school. So for compliance here, you must have multi-year list. It must, and you can see in the explanation, it says the class schedule must be multi-year through exit. So it's from when they enter high school. So if they enter high school as a freshman with you, you would want to keep it from when they enter to when their anticipated exit is. So if you're talking about them being on a 4-year plan, there should be 4 years of classes listed. If they are on a longer term, then you should be discussing that and planning for those extra years. So there may be 5 or even 6. So just keep that in mind. I think I'm going to talk about these pieces. Yep. So we kind of talked about that multi-year exit through high school. Right. So if a student enters and they're, a sophomore or junior, you would just do from when they enter your high school to their anticipated exit. That's okay. But it does need to be through their anticipated exit. Best practice when you're listing out these courses is to not write electives. You want to document the classes that they anticipate they'll be taking. And then again, this is that showing movement, right? So the student probably will change classes. So I'm going to go back to this screen real quick. You can see here, this is Bill, because he, in his couple of later years, he's taking Introduction to Business and Carpentry 1. So those align with his goals because he's interested in marketing or carpentry. So this is what we mean by being more specific with the courses. Instead of just writing electives, actually list those classes that those electives would be. And we understand that this will change or could change, especially depending on the students' changes of what they want to do, but also sometimes classes within the school changes, and that's okay. You just change it yearly as you meet and decide what the student's going to work on. Okay. Next is section 9F. And these are where you list those transition services for the student. Excuse me. So here you have transition services, and you have several. You have the education instruction, career employment, and then community experiences. And again, you have that final one that it's if appropriate. So that last one can be blank. However, really think about, does the student need those daily living skills or functional vocational evaluation listed there? But for those other three, the education, career, and community, those must have at least one activity listed within them. So our guidance is to just document this in a list. There's no need to write a big narrative, but these are really those services that the student will be accessing. And they're being provided to the student by other people, kind of thing. So just keep that in mind. Now, here's a little reminder that when you're listing those services in this section, you want to list the services that occur during that life of that IEP. And then you don't want to include any future services or activities. You can show older ones, like you could document, you could keep the ones in there, but if they're not receiving them anymore, they can stay there, but you just don't want to put any future ones in there. All right, and finally, section 10 is where you check off when the student has been notified of their transfer of rights when they're going to be turning 18. So this really should be completed at or before the IEP meeting for the year the student will turn 17. So this is like the one thing on the IEP that doesn't change. And so it would just be checked, yes, and then the date that they were informed. So that would not change because they've been informed.
Carly, we have a couple of questions in the chat that
Perfect.
I
All right.
am not sure. I've been answering the ones I can.
Okay.
If there's no independent living goal, is it okay that there's still independent living activities and services? I never look for that alignment, but it's a good question.
I don't either. I would say compliance, right? If we look for compliance versus compliance would be that, yes, that would be compliant. However, best practice would be, I would think if you have services, you would think that there would probably be a goal, right?
Yeah. I
But
hadn't even thought of
compliance,
that.
yeah, compliance would be, because neither one of them are necessary. So if you
Right.
choose to add one, then that would be compliant.
Yeah. Just interesting.
Yeah.
Good question, Randy Lee. So this section no longer needs to be a cumulative list of services. It should be a cumulative list of services.
Is that Section 9F,
9F.
this one.
Yeah, this is Audra. I asked the question.
Mhm.
I thought you said that you could take stuff out, so I wanted to just clarify that this section is cumulative and you just add as you go.
I think so. Compliance would be that it is filled in for the IEP, the life of the IEP as it is. However, best practice would be to keep in the previous services. So you can see here, like speech and language was 22, 23.
Mhm.
So they no longer receive speech and language. However, they kept it on there to show that they did, and it's showing that movement that they had it, and now they no longer have it. The key in this section is you don't put anything ahead. Don't put anything in the future, right? So it's only current or previous. You can include previous, but nothing future. That's a good question.
Caseworkers, Tennille, it's anything you would put in section 9G, so I don't think you typically put caseworkers in section 9G, so you don't have to invite them. Dates required in 9F, highly recommended, not required. When will the video be available? Usually within a couple weeks. We have to go through a whole state process to get it up on the website. And nothing happens fast in state government. Sorry. All right. I think that that's all of the chat box for now.
Okay. Okay, so just some things to it's kind of a cumulative. Transition plans really should be about the student, right? It's student centered. Getting the family involved is also important if you can, whenever you can. And then those assessments, like assessment. That's why it's great to do multiple, more than one, to make sure you're getting the information about the student to help them make that decision about what they want to do for transition. And then the students must be invited. That's a big one. And then those outside agencies, that is the big thing that has changed, that we are now training to. Like I said, we've been training to it for a few years, but we haven't hit everybody, right? So it's great if we can get that message out there. So they must be invited if you know about them. So just keep that in mind. If they're listed in 9G, they must be invited. Yeah. Any other questions come up, Jennifer?
I think, oh, wait, one just popped up. Let's see. Our district is participating in the P2P grant. And if we have students signed up, I don't know what the P2P grant is, but probably.
So the P2P grant is partners, Pathways to Partnership grant. We're working with Rebecca, I can't think of her, pronounce her last name, and other pieces. And so we're part of that grant as well as Holden School District. Right now, there's only 2 districts and they're looking at inviting others, but it's all about transition and transition services and educational transition kits and doing all that stuff. So,
yeah, I would totally put that in there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we got one from
just
Jan. 18-year-olds sign their own documents. Yes, they do. Are they allowed to do a revocation of services when parents are not in favor of that? Probably. I mean, they have the rights of the parent when they turn 18. So I think that they would, but maybe that might be a question for 1-800 Eric Herlin. Um, all right. Thank you, Sarah. That I stole that joke from somebody. It wasn't me. I don't know. I don't remember who I stole that joke from, but I love it, so it's now mine. I know I should give credit, but all right. All right, move along. We have some checklists for you. I know Carly mentioned at the beginning that B13 is a federal indicator that we report to the federal government every February. And if even one of these things is non-compliant, we have to report it as a non-compliant transition plan. We were audited by OSEP about a year, 2 years ago now. And we complained about this and they agreed, but they did not changing it. I've been in national conferences where everybody has complained about this. So if you could have a really, really strong transition plan, but the purpose of the meeting, the little checkbox wasn't checked on the advance written notice, and we have to report that as a non-compliant transition plan. It's very annoying for all of us. But that's kind of why we hammer transition a lot. We have a link right here, and that link will work on the PDF of this presentation. This comes from a OSEP funded this organization temporarily to come up with this, and this explains kind of how to check your transition plans to make sure they're compliant, and how when we come out to review transition plans, this is kind of the base that we use to come up with how we look at transition plans.
Before we move on, a
Yes.
quick question. So we have students in our life skills program. And if we have a student that the parent continues to have guardianship for the child beyond 18, and they don't have the capacity, I mean, I don't have that I don't think I have that issue right now, but coming up through and 2 years, I'm going to have, I foresee that as a potential. How do we include a child in a meaningful transition plan when they don't have I hate saying it, but the cognitive capacity to do that meaningfully?
So one of our case studies will address that. And some of I know I was an FLS teacher, so I completely understand what you're saying. And I did transition assessments, like there were some questionnaires that the parents filled out, kind of asking about what the child liked to do at home, kind of things. It is not easy. But there are some assessments out there like that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, the link isn't working.
I'm working on it. I'm trying
All
to
right.
grab the.
Thank you, Carly.
Yep.
Man, I thought I checked all the links, but I didn't. Can you go back one slide?
Oh, yep.
Sorry.
Sorry.
All right. Here's a case study. And this is one of those kids, Michelle. So Bill is 19 years old. He enjoys using a switch, right? Cause and effect. He receives SDI with an alternate curriculum. He's in a self-contained setting all day. He receives all of the related services. He's fed through a G-tube, and he has a tracheotomy and ventilator. So he's a pretty involved kid. So in this situation, we're using his enjoyment of a switch to kind of come up with his goals. Can you go to the next one, Carly? Sorry, I know you're multitasking. I'm sorry. So he has a goal to basically participate in on-the-job training using a switch. He's going to be in some kind of center-based program or in-home. And he's getting all kinds of vocational medical therapeutic supports. And he's going to participate in some kind of job training using switches. And for an employment goal, right, he'll participate in a technologically supported or volunteer workplace with supported job development services through Voc Rehab. And he's going to live at home, participate to the maximum extent possible in his daily routines. So they're pretty basic goals, but they are true post-secondary goals. And they take his desires, what he wants, what he likes to do, his interests.
So Jennifer, can you actually put in there that other agency, like Voc Rehab, is going to do that after? I mean, because that you're speaking for another agency.
That's a good question.
No
That's
guarantee they're going to do that.
That's a really good point. That's a really bad example we have there because we say don't put specific schools in there. Yeah, don't do that. Let's call that a very bad example and we'll fix that. Thanks, Michelle. All right, so this is Bill's, right? We did his transition plan. Now we're doing the rest of his IEP. So we have his strengths. So everybody has strengths and we're using those strengths to feed that transition plan. We have gaps, right? Communication. He's independently using that switch to communicate and he has limited fine motor skills. So those are his functional gaps. He has a functional goal. He has his device, which is one button, right? To communicate yes, to indicate for a desired item. So this goal links to all of his post-secondary goals, right? We want him to independently use that switch to communicate. All right, case study number 2, very different student. This is Destiny. She's 17 years old, outgoing, friendly. She wants to work in hospitality and attend community college. She has an SLD in reading. Her math skills are low average. She's in the band and she works part-time at her dad's insurance business. So she's interested in hospitality. And she's interested in community college. So her education goal is to enroll in hospitality training at a community college. And her employment goal is to work at a hotel or motel in the area. So those are related. And she has an independent living goal to live in an apartment with friends or by herself. So a lot of times kids like Destiny who just has a specific learning disability in reading, we skipped the independent living goal, but it's something you might want to consider because I would argue that all kids need help with that stuff. So just something for the team to talk about. So her course of study, you could see she has personal finance in there, food service, marketing, all things she's going to need for her independent living, as well as hospitality. She also has all of the classes she's going to need in order to be accepted at community college. So those count too. She has services, job shadow hospitality workers, investigate careers, Girl Scouts, local budgeting course, first aid CPR, driver's license. So all of these kind of things are going to help her attain her post-secondary goals. She has an academic gap in reading fluency. And this goal will help her with everything, obviously, because reading is important in all aspects of life. But this is going to help her in community college. It'll help her be accepted in community college and help her get through those classes and do well. And it will also help with independent living. So this one also helps with all of her post-secondary goals. So that's kind of a good example of when you do the transition plan first, then you can make sure that your whole IEP is kind of feeding that transition plan. All right, did we have any?
I just have another question,
Yes.
Jennifer, because, I'm just full of them.
That's good. You're helpful because you're helping us fix our presentation, Michelle.
Under the independent living piece, and like that one said, obtain driver's license. So
Mhm.
those can be futuristic in regards to, not things that they've actually done in comparison to some of the other areas on the transition plan. That's one that can be projected that's something that they want to do
As
independently.
long as it's during the lifetime of that IEP. You don't want to put something 2 years ahead. You want to put something that's going to happen during the life of that IEP, or you expect to happen during that life of the IEP.
Okay, because under the independent living, you had, as an example, obtain driver's license. So, okay, thank you.
I actually have a follow-up question to that. So the year that my kids do expect to take their test for their driver's license, I will put that in there. If it doesn't happen within that year though, how,
Yeah.
do I have to, and I change the date, like I might, or not change the date, I would add the date, right? Because they're attempting it maybe the second time around.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
you can't, we're not going to
So
come
when
and
something
we're not
doesn't
gonna come and
happen,
slap your hand for the kid not getting their driver's license. It was planned that it was going to happen that year. It didn't happen. Yeah, you could put it on the next year as well.
okay, because I have that with other services too. Like we plan something, but sometimes it doesn't always happen. So I didn't know if I had to take it off or just change the date or
I don't
add a
think
date.
so. Yeah.
And
I have a
sometimes it
follow-up.
comes down to a fiscal piece that the kid can't financially pay for driver's ed. So they want to do it. And we put that on there, but then they don't end up being able to do it. Do we end up just taking that off?
What do you think, Carly, on that one? If they're not going to do it at all?
Right. I was gonna say, if I can maybe just making a note instead of maybe just put the year and just say wasn't able to or something, like, you know what I mean? Like if it went past, because then if it comes up again a different year and you want to add it again,
So just put a justification for it.
I think so.
Maybe in the written notice you talk about it.
Yeah. But then would they just delete it off of the transition plan?
I think if it was, I think when you're going into the next year, you could leave it as something that was in there the previous year and then note in the written notice that it didn't happen.
Right.
I have a follow-up question to that as well, kind of along the same lines. So if it's listed in the transition plan that the kid is going to get their license or they're going to get a state ID or whatever it is but it's determined that the district or the school isn't going to assist in that it's like the outside provider or
Yep.
the parent, and then it doesn't happen, is there a danger of like years later somebody coming back and saying, why didn't you do this? You didn't help us reach?
That is talked about somewhere. Let me take that question because there's an answer to that. I just don't remember what it is.
Thank you. Can we indicate on the document, like if it's the parent who says, absolutely, I will do that for the child, can we indicate like,
Yes. Who's going to do it?
yeah,
Yes.
okay,
Some states actually have that as part of their form, who's responsible
okay,
for that. So yes, you
excellent.
can list that, absolutely.
Thank you.
And that's a good idea, actually. All right, I will look up that question and get back to you, Audra. All right. We have some frequently asked questions, and you guys have asked some really good not frequently asked questions, so that's really cool because keeps us interested and busy and happy. New ninth grader, you just get a ninth grader in and their annual is due in September. And how are you going to write a transition plan for this kid when you don't know them and haven't had time to do transition assessments? You don't have to. They need to have a transition plan in place by the end of their ninth grade year. So, yes, you'll have to meet again at the end of the year, but you'll have time to do transition assessments and get to know the kid. What if they want to be a rock star? Teach them what that means and what other jobs they might have that are related to that. Which I think we talked about that earlier, but it was video gamer. Specific colleges just you can't guarantee that they can get in. And same thing for Voc Rehab, Michelle. Thank you for that. Parents, yes. Here's our question, Audra. Yes. Parents, and I do like the idea of noting that in there, that the parents are responsible for that. Oh, okay. So this comes up. What do we do if the parents don't want to encourage the child to seek employment? And at this point, I would say talk to Titus. We have her contact information in a few slides. But she can help you with how to talk to that family, and she's very passionate about post-secondary transition, so she could get anybody excited about it. All right, any other questions before we hit resources? This has been really great. You guys have really had good questions. All right, I'm going to scooch on to resources. So this is Transition Maine. This is where you will find a lot of free transition assessments and all kinds of other cool stuff. It's hard to find on the DOE website. Like many things are hard to find on the DOE website. So I would go to this link and bookmark it so that you can always find it. This is Titus. If you have not talked to Titus, talk to Titus. Go to her power hours. I think they're on Tuesdays at 3. You can find them on the DOE calendar, which we have a link to in a little bit. But she is so passionate about all things post-secondary transition, and she is a wealth of information, and she will help you with whatever you want help with. So talk to Titus. This is the National Technical Assistance Center on transition. You can find all kinds of resources there as well. We have, I think, a couple different things from different states. Wisconsin has a lot of self-advocacy resources. Different states have different things. Tennessee has a lot of cool stuff too. So just look up state websites for post-secondary transition, and every state has kind of something different. This is, Project 10. I think that's related to that checklist, but they have a lot of good toolkits and things like that for transition. And this is from Project 10 as well. And then we have our resources. So our website has some kind of general special ed cool stuff. This link will bring you to all the law stuff as well as the procedural manual, and procedural safeguards are there as well. This is our page, Supervision, Monitoring, and Support Teams page. I got to update that because it looks a little bit different now. Also really hard to get to because the Maine DOE website is really hard to navigate. So if you bookmark this one, I'm responsible for keeping this up to date, and I have to bookmark it so that I can find it. So bookmark it. Our resources page has information sheets, quick reference checklists, all kinds of fun stuff, a little light bedtime reading. We record all of our trainings and put them here. Titus's power hours are recorded and put here as well. So there's quite a few recordings there, and you get, for ours anyway, you get contact hours for watching the recordings as well. We do office hours the second and fourth Wednesday of every month at 3 o'clock. We record everything, put it on the website. I think all of these that say recording coming soon are ready to go, and I am going to put them up on the website as soon as we're done here. It has to, of course, go through an approval process, but hopefully it'll be up by tomorrow. There are registration links here for the upcoming office hours and trainings. We have a lot of guest speakers this year, so we're super excited about that. And we have, oh, this is forms. So they changed our website around a lot and nobody can find where the forms are. They're at, I think it's called Resources for Schools and Families or something like that on the left-hand side. That's where the forms are. The link is here for you. And, oh, Carly, you're so good. Carly just put this link in the chat for feedback. We like feedback. We use it. We change up our PD based on feedback. So be honest and put in your email address and pick, what are we picking from the drop down, Carly? Transition? Post-secondary?
I think it's B13.
B13. Pick
I should probably change that.
B13
Yeah.
from the drop down, and Carly will send you contact hours for hanging out with us today. We have a question. If an 8th grader whose annual is in September, is turning 16 the summer before high school, I would wait. I would do it in 8th grade. If they're turning 16 before they hit high school, I would do the transition plan in 8th grade. Because it has to be in place when they turn 16, I believe. So yes, 8th grade. Good question. This is where you can find the DOE online. And we have our contact information. Any questions at all, absolutely reach out to us. The recording should be up within a couple weeks. We had a request for the chat. So I think if you want a copy of the chat, maybe put your email address in there and Julie will send that out. Does that sound okay, Julie? All right. Throw your email address in the chat if you want a copy of the chat. Julie will send them out to you. But any questions at all, reach out to us about any kind of compliance thing at all. And we are here because we're teachers and the support part of our job is our favorite part of our job.
Can I ask you a question about a question that was in the chat?
Of course.
There was one earlier that asked about 18-year-olds signing a revocation of services when the parents are not in favor of that. Are they allowed to do that because they're 18?
I think that they probably are because they have all of the rights. They have all of the parental rights transfer to the student. So if that is a parental right, it would transfer to the student. I would definitely have a meeting about it. That's a rough thing. I know.
I think that you're accurate on that interpretation. The only time that wouldn't apply is if the parents continue to have custody, gone to court.
Guardianship.
18.
Yeah.
So, but I believe you're correct. Because I think I've checked with Drummond and Woodsum on that one before.
Oh, cool. I like it when we say the same thing as them. Whew. They're the lawyers, though. Always take their advice over ours. Yeah, I think Carly put that link in.
I gave a link to a website. It isn't directly to that checklist, but that's where the checklist came from. So I apologize. You'll kind of have to search around in there for it. Let me see. I'll drop it. It's this one. So it came from this one. I think it's that NTACT, but so it should be in here somewhere.
Yeah, that organization that put it together was a temporary organization.
Okay.
So we'll have to. Oh, here we go. Here's a chat. I'm going to put another link in there as well. It's still from NTACT, but I think this one will get you right there.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. This has been really great. We appreciate your questions and your feedback. So have a great day.